Hi, everybody. Happy Wednesday. Welcome to Advisory. I hope you guys are all doing well. The topic we're covering today in Advisory is a very serious one, and it is one that is not fun to talk about, but it is necessary to talk openly and honestly about. And that topic is suicide awareness and prevention. We've been building up to this a little bit with our mental health advisories. You may have seen some posters and bulletin boards around the hallways talking about suicide awareness and prevention. It is always a tough subject to talk about because so many of us have either been directly or indirectly influenced by suicide, whether it's thoughts that we've had ourselves or thoughts or actions that people in our lives have had, our loved ones. And even though it is tough to talk about, we want to talk about tough things here in Advisory because the information or the awareness that we build could potentially save a life somewhere down the line. So in this video, I'm going to go through some of the statistics regarding suicide. I'm going to talk about some of the warning signs that you may notice in others if they are considering suicide. We're going to talk also about some risk factors, things that make it more likely that someone would consider suicide, and then some protective factors, things that would prevent that from happening. We'll end with ways that you as a friend can help, very similar to what we talked about yesterday in Advisory, and I'll give you some resources to help out even further beyond this video. So please pay attention, please take this seriously, and be mindful of others as we talk through these difficult things. First, some statistics. There were almost 4,000 reported suicides in Texas in the year 2020. It is the second leading cause of death for ages 15 to 24 in the US. And according to the National Alliance on Mental Illness, or NAMI, 20% of high school students report serious thoughts of suicide. That's 1 in every 5. And 9% have made an attempt to take their lives, which is almost 1 out of every 10. So it's safe to say that this is not an issue that is reserved for the far and away. It's in our homes, it's in our conversations, and it is in the people that we love. First, let's talk about some warning signs that you may see in others that may be a sign that they are considering suicide. And it's important to note that any 1 or 2 of these may not be a sign that someone is considering suicide, but many of them added up maybe. So some of these things may be just a momentary depression or sadness, or it may be a result of something else. But if you see a lot of these signs in one person, and especially all at once, then it may be time to start asking questions or get some help. Acting emotional or crying excessively, always feeling tired or run down, changes in sleeping or eating patterns, being more moody or depressed than usual, the loss of interest in activities or hobbies, loss of appetite or weight loss, extreme changes in behavior, neglecting personal appearance, abusing alcohol or drugs specifically to deal with negative feelings, unusual anger, aggression, or violent behavior, looking for access to lethal means. So if someone is looking for a weapon or something that could potentially take a life, that is definitely a warning sign. Deliberately cutting, burning, or otherwise hurting oneself. Talking, writing, or hinting about death or suicide or something like ending it all or using language like that. Giving away personal items and possessions. Being very self-critical and withdrawing from friends and wanting to be left alone. So again, any one of these may not be a sign, but if you see many of them together, it should raise some red flags in your mind. Now let's talk about some risk factors. These are the things that make it more likely that someone would get depressed, possibly to the point of extreme or suicidal ideation. And there's a few different categories of this. There are individual risk factors, and these are the risk factors that are contained within a single person. And that could be a history of depression or other mental illnesses, personal loss, so if they lose somebody or something close to them, previous attempts at suicide, criminal or legal problems, abuse or other serious traumas can be risk factors, and also serious illness can be a possible individual risk factor. Another category is relational risk factors. This is risk factors that have to do with how this person interacts with others. Some risk factors here could be things like bullying, maybe a family or loved one's history of suicide, a loss of relationships, maybe a really bad breakup or a loss of friendships, high conflict or violent relationships, and social isolation. Not feeling like you belong anywhere can be a risk factor in this as well. Some community risk factors are maybe a lack of access to healthcare, which can include mental health care like counseling, community violence, maybe living in a community that has a lot of violence, historical trauma, and discrimination can also be community risk factors. And finally, societal risk factors. One of the societal factors can be stigma associated with help seeking and mental illness. And that just means that maybe there's a general stigma against going to get help with your mental illness. It's this idea that seeking help means that you are weak, and a strong person would have to just wipe away the tears and get over it. That's what a stigma is. And that out there is going to cause less people to go get help. Easy access to lethal means of suicide among people at risk. This can be things like the prevalence of guns, especially, and the unsafe media portrayal of suicide, especially if it's in a TV show or movie wherein they romanticize suicide or maybe make it out to be not that big of a deal or something like that. But in addition to some risk factors, there are also several protective factors. These are things that we can change about our individual life, our relationships, our community, and our society to prevent suicide from happening. Individual protective factors include things like effective coping and problem solving skills, the ability to self regulate your own emotions and to cope when things get tough, reasons for living, things like family, friends, pets, or the future, or a life purpose. Those can all be protective factors. Strong sense of cultural and personal identity. This is basically just feeling anchored in who you are and your values and your identity. There are also relational protective factors like emotional support from friends, partners, and family, and feeling connected to others in general can all be protective factors. Feeling like somebody has your back, kind of like what we were talking about yesterday. There are also community protective factors, things like feeling connected to school, community, and other social institutions, as well as the availability of consistent and high quality physical and mental health care. And some societally protective factors that we could work towards as a society are a reduced amount of access to lethal means of suicide among those at risk, cultural, religious, or moral objections to suicide, or a reduced stigma around seeking help and mental illness. So all of these things can be protective factors, things that will prevent people from feeling like they're alone to the point where they have suicidal ideation. Like I said, suicide affects many people, not just the person who is considering it. You may be seeing some of those risk factors and you may be seeing some of those warning signs and be thinking of a friend or a person in your life that may be expressing some of those things. And you may wonder what to do. Here are some of the things you can do. If a friend needs help, don't ignore the warning signs. Again, think about all of those not as individual warning signs, but if they start to add up, it's time to start asking questions. You should take any mention of suicide seriously, even if it may not seem like the person is being serious. People may mention suicide flippantly or in a joking manner, but that may be them trying to subtly bring it up. And so if somebody mentions it and they haven't really mentioned it before, it might be time to ask some questions. Listen and be supportive. Once you ask those questions, just listen to what your friend has to say without any judgment or any pushback. Let your friend know that you will help. Let your friend know that you're there for them and encourage them to talk to a trusted adult. Because even though you might be a good resource for your friend, and even though you might be a good shoulder to cry on and a good listening ear, it's still important, especially when you're young, to talk to a trusted adult about these things so that that adult can get them the help that they need. Help your friend find school or community resources such as counselors. We've got great counselors here on campus. Ms. Pott especially is very good as a mental health clinician, and there are other resources that we have as well. And maybe most importantly is don't keep it a secret from others who can help. Now, of course, you don't want to break your friend's trust by just telling anybody. You don't want to spread any sort of rumors like that. That's definitely not going to help. But don't keep it a secret from an adult that can help or a counselor or somebody like that. You can still keep your friend's secret or feelings safe while also keeping them safe by finding somebody that can help them. And lastly, don't be afraid to talk about it. We kind of approached this subject yesterday when we were talking about seize the awkward, and we're trying to get over the awkward feeling of, oh, I don't really want to have these conversations, or what if I make it worse by having these conversations? And studies show that that's not necessarily true. What doesn't seem to increase risk of suicide is talking about the importance of mental health, talking about the importance of reaching out to people who are struggling, or if you're struggling, reaching out for help. Talking about suicide in general and talking about depression is not going to make things worse. Sometimes people think that, ooh, if I talk about suicide, that will give them the idea. And that's not how that really works. The person, if they are to that point, is probably already considering it or getting close to considering it. And so oftentimes you saying it, are you considering taking your own life or hurting yourself, can really bring it out of their mind and maybe look at the situation a little bit more objectively. But in any case, talking about it can give you the opportunity to help them or them the opportunity to seek help for themselves. All right. So that is all that I have to say on that subject. To prevent suicide and to be aware of it is really just to be paying attention to those around you and noticing any signs of things being off and really just being willing to talk to them or others about it. If you need more resources when it comes to talking about suicide or for helping maybe some of your friends or loved ones that may have those thoughts, you can find some resources on mental health services on Longhorn Country. You click there, and this will be the first page that you see. Shout out to Ms. Kime for making this so nice and organized and for collecting these resources. It says use these resources anytime you need them, and remember help is always available, both on and off campus. You do not have to struggle alone. On campus, we have direct support from Mrs. Pott, who is our local mental health clinician. You can email her at atovarpott@dallasisd.org, or you can text her your name and when you would like to meet at this number right here, 972-984-8886. Miss Johnson is our reset coordinator. She is also very, very good at helping people talk through their emotions. You will often see her all around the hallways, but you can also email her at capjohnson@dallasisd.org. There are also some other very useful national hotlines that are maybe more specific to what somebody may be going through. Those are the Trevor Project at thetrevorproject.org, or the number below. The Trevor Project specifically helps youth that are in the LGBTQIA plus community and some of the specific struggles that they have. And so if you need that, it's there. Also, for sexual assault or abuse support, you have rainn.org and the number there. SAMHSA, which deals in substance abuse support, and that's at samhsa.gov/find treatment, or the number there. Also, if you're dealing with some sort of dating abuse or relationship abuse, loveisrespect.org, or the number there. There's also the National Domestic Violence Hotline, www.thehotline.org, or that number. There's also Vets for Warriors, specific support for veterans. If you have a veteran in your life that is dealing with some sort of extreme ideation, this is there for them. And again, that is under the Mental Health Services tab of Longhorn Country. Okay, so I know that it is a heavy subject. You may be feeling it very heavily or feeling something else very heavily, and that is what our next activity is going to focus on. Hello, it is the next day. Okay, so this is how we're going to do this activity. All of your second period teachers should have a stack of small papers that they got from their box. Teachers, if you didn't get to get this from your box, then any old small piece of paper like a Post-it note or index card will work just fine. But if you got the papers, they look like this. All right, and it says this is the Let Go paper. You may have seen this trend on TikTok where people write out things that are very heavy on their heart or that they feel like they need to let go of on a plate, and then they break the plate into a million pieces. Obviously, that is not a safe thing for 2,000 teenagers to do at once, and so instead of that, we're going to do the same thing just on a piece of paper, and it'll probably have a similar effect. So this is a totally private activity. This is not something that you need to share or need to ask others what they wrote on their piece of paper, but it's anything that has been weighing you down lately. Maybe it's a heavy feeling after the video we just watched, or maybe it is a heavy thing that has been going on in your life, or just a heavy feeling that you've had lately. Anything that you want to let go of, you write down on this piece of paper on the back. Okay, so I'm going to write mine, and I'm not going to tell you because it is personal. All right, so I wrote mine down on the piece of paper. I'm going to fold it for a little extra privacy. And then at that point, it is time to let go of this feeling. And you can do this alone at the trash can, or you can get a buddy in your class to go with you to do it at the same time. You can even all gather around the trash can and rip them up at once. Whatever you guys want to do in your class. The idea is I've put this heavy feeling on this paper and I am letting go of that feeling. And that's not to say that the feeling automatically goes away. That's not to say that I'm not still feeling it, but it does represent that this feeling that I have does not define who I am. The feeling or situation or whatever it was that you wrote down on this paper is, of course, maybe not going to go away, even though we have these feelings and even though we go through things that are sometimes difficult or out of our control. It doesn't have to define who we are or how we live the rest of our lives. So that's that. I'm going to throw every bit of it away, not on the ground, because I want the custodians to wrap it up in that trash bag and take it away so that tomorrow or the next day when you come into this class, it's gone and you've been able to let it go. So I hope that you enjoy that activity. I hope that you are doing all right today. And if you're not, please don't hesitate to reach out. There's lots of resources available for you. And no matter what, the Longhorn family is here for each other. And that's what's important. Be good to yourself and others. Have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you tomorrow.